So Shannon O'Malley is on our one of our officers. She's our secretary at the moment. Um, and she's going to tell you all about her big project. So you're going to get to learn a lot about what's going on in Shannon's life when she's not volunteering or serving on the city of Roslyn city council or helping her husband at the mill. She wears many hats. So thank you, Shannon. Welcome.
Are we? All right. Okay. So, um, this is the Cometto boarding house right here.
What?
Can you can you hear me now? Okay, I'll talk right into this thing. Okay. So a little bit about me. I did not grow up in Roslyn. But my dad went to school here. This is my grandma. Um, in the late 70s in Roslyn. She came over here and so my dad went to school here and this picture up here is me and my brother and Donnie Osmanovich. So we spent a lot of time. Grandpa Donnie was a very informative person to my dad and to our family. So we spent a lot of time up here in the Tianaway. My childhood was hunting and fishing and gold panning and mushroom hunting. So, in some ways, I kind of adopted that culture, and it's very special to all of us that we get to kind of share that with everyone else. And we just we love it up here, and how could you not? So, um, that's how I came to know Roslyn and care about Roslyn and Grandpa Donnie is a Osmanovich, Croatians, and they have. I mean, he was so full of culture and funny sayings, and he's just an absolute uh, joy of a person to know. So the magnetism that little kids have for their grandparents, that's kind of the way I felt about him. And so to get to learn more, to know that more people like him is a little bit of a mind blowing thing. So that's one of my favorite things about this place is it are the special people who who grew up here and come from here and care about this place. So the boarding house, this is where the boarding house is on the map of Roslyn. So right under the Zoom thing is the Catholic Church, but the red dot is the boarding house. So you can see the coal mine trail where the railroad used to be, and then there's Bobby Fisher's barn right there at the end. So this area of town was a super busy place. This there would be a light at the company store they could see from that block that would say if there was work in the mines or not. And on payday there'd be a line of miners all the way up from the store getting their paychecks. So this is right across from where the depot was. This is where everyone came to Roslyn, was right here in this place. So that's where the boarding house is. This is what the boarding house looked when Mr. Charlie Gondo sold it to us. So remember this, Charlie? So it's a total beast of a building. And I mean, it took, I can't even imagine the amount of time and energy that the Meritich and then the Guando family and the Divalbises all put into this house. But it's just one of those things that lost its function as a boarding house. And so it's super massive. You can see all the chimneys on this thing. It just was a huge, massive undertaking. And obviously needed a new roof. So That's where we started. So the question of how old it is a mystery to me. This is a Sanborn map, the fire insurance map. So this is the oldest one we have, from 1899. The boarding house is not in this picture. So only a few areas of Roslyn were in the Sanborn maps at this time. There's one with Pennsylvania Avenue and all the buildings on there. And then this is the other one. You can see it's hard to not point and stay by the microphone. So I'm kind of, so this is 903. This is First Street. And so you can see that like auxiliary rail line there would go out. So I think that block is about where the barn, the coal barn is. And so the block off the screen to the east, where the Catholic church and where the boarding house would be, aren't covered in the Sanborn map. So I don't know what structure was on the property. I do have some early land records. So in 1893, a woman named Margaret McLennan was owning the boarding house and sold it to another woman, Melissa Burriff. They were both unmarried school teachers at the time. So that's curious. What kind of building would unmarried women be owning? Could that have been a boarding house? I'm not sure. And then in 1895, Burriff sold it to Ella Brown, who's a Black woman. And she was married at the time, but by the 1900 census, they were living on 2nd Street. So I don't think they owned it by 1900. So there's a mysterious block of time prior to 1910 where I don't know exactly what was happening there, but I do believe there was a boarding house there, and maybe there was multiple structures and one burned or flooded or any other sort of thing. So that's as early as it gets. And then by 1889, I have the first record of Joseph Cometto coming into town, Giuseppe Cometto, here coming by way of Germany from Italy. And then by 1900, he's a boarder in a different building in Roslyn. So about a 10-year period where he somehow comes from New York to Roslyn. And then he sends for his wife, Louisa Cometto. And by 1902, she dies in Roslyn. So he is now a widower. All right, this is a big one. So all of a sudden I go from nothing until 1910. Now these are all the people in the boarding house. So that dang thing is blocking my so the way this kind of breaks out is the owner is down here, Joseph Cometto. But up top, I have Matthew Snyder, and he's Austrian Croatian. So the top half, you can see the first half of all the names are Croatian people. So it's as if this family, the Snyders, they have the wife and the kids, and then they have Matthew Plesha, Anton Plesha, and then Ivan Tomac, then a handful of Meineriches, a Smith, more Tomacs, and then a bunch of Italians. So I think maybe there was a Croatian head of the house and an Italian head of the house is the way I understand it. And now there's some other things in here that are interesting. So under Joe, you can see he's the head and he's listed as a proprietor. Under him is Maria Negretti, and she comes from Colorado. She was just widowed in Colorado. So she came here with her son, Bernardo, who's underneath her, and they're listed as servants. And they work, she works as the cook, and he's listed as a salesman for the grocery store. I'll tell you more about the grocery store in a second. And then there's also a list of people that are named as partners, all Italian people named as partners. One of them is the barber, one of them is the baker, one of them is a proprietor to a saloon. So this is curious to me for a few reasons. It's curious in who owns the house. Is it one man who owns this house, or how much wealth sharing was a part of the Italian community to make this happen? So I'll show you what the house looked like in 1912 on the Sanborn map. So you can see this building is the same structure that's there today. It's the same footprint, same concrete. And you can see in the very front that GRO, that means grocery. So there was a grocery store all the way in the front, little delicatessen, probably Italian, and then a full bakery also in the back, a big baking oven. The oven has to be 15 by 15 feet wide from this.
Do another grocery store in front?
No. So what's existing now is this is gone. So so that's what was happening in the boarding house in 1910 and 1912. All of a sudden, it's this huge happening place with all these businesses within it and all these other people living as boarders inside of it and families with kids as well. So in 1915, this is the first time I find her, is Mary Cometto. So I never found a record of them marrying, but my theory is the Maria Negretti, the servant who was the cook that came from Colorado, I think he may have married her, and I think she's the Mary Cometto that we see here. So she dies soon after, within 5 years she dies. And she's from Italy. Her parents are listed as unknown. And the person who signs the document is Mr. Cometto of Roslyn. That's all I have. The only Cometto I've ever found. And then by 1920, this is the boarding house listed in the census, 3A. And the only person listed in the house is Joe Cometto. Curious, but 1920 is also Prohibition time. And just in a year later, there'll be a big wine bust. So 300 gallons of wine were found in the cellar. So this is May of 1921. So my guess is maybe he told the census takers to get lost, and he didn't let them, know what was going on in town. So there's also stories that he had a still. So one of the great things about having a bakery is a great cover story for a still, because you need to bring in raw materials, you need to bring in sugar, and you're going to be you're going to bake bread, and that's going to cover the smells and smoke and that kind of thing. So I do believe he was also moonshining. And then another guess of mine is that he has a fire at Roslyn. The concrete frame building at number 3 Washington Avenue, East Roslyn, owned by Joe Cometto, was almost completely destroyed by fire at 6:15 in the morning. The fire was believed to have been caused by an overheated stove. Or, I don't know. So we see evidence of this fire in the house, you can see sistered beams and that kind of thing. So the top levels of the house, I believe, did burn and were rebuilt. So that would give context to that. And then by 1936, this story, veteran Roslyn miner shoots self to death, is actually about Joe Cometto. So at age 65, a miner in the Northwest Improvement Company mines at Roslyn for 25 years, shot himself 3 times in the head early today, and suffered fatal wounds. So that's another mystery that remains. So it's very suspicious 3 times. Mrs. Tom Brownlee, a neighbor who heard the shots, said that they sounded as if a man were chopping wood rapidly. Cometto had been ill several months and yesterday told several persons he was going to kill himself. So at this time, I don't think Joe had another wife. I think he'd been, widowed twice. So I think he was alone, and I don't think he had kids. So he's buried in New City, but his grave was unmarked. And we marked that thanks to the help of the cemetery commission. We put a new headstone for Joe Cometto in the cemetery, but up until that time, I don't think, anyone was coming to visit Joe in the cemetery. Meanwhile, next door, here's our Meritich family. I don't know exactly who is in this photo. I don't know if any of the Meritiches know, but I believe this would have been Francis and Joe Meritich and their 3 kids and maybe a brother-in-law. I don't know the year of that photo. What do you think? No? Okay. But you can see the boarding house behind it. So that's the house they used to live in. Right there on the same block. And I think they had cousins and family that were already in the boarding house. They also had this family also had, so the parents of this couple, the parents of Fanny Meritich had another house on this block that was a boarding house as well. So there was a bunch of boarders, and now this is in Brookside neighborhood in Roslyn, and there were a lot of Croatians here, and up the hill, a lot of Croatians. So this was a big Croatian neighborhood, right here. And here's some pictures of the Meritich family. So this is Frances Meritich soon after she came here from Delnica, Croatia. She's 16. And then there's a picture of her and Joe together, and another picture. This is the top picture is them in the lawn of the boarding house. You can see the 3.5 on the post behind them. And then this, maybe they're on a picnic down at the lake or something. Both of these pictures, I believe, are holding Fran as a baby, Fran Dibelbus, and their dog, Mickey. So their daughter, Kate Blondo, then helped run the house. This is her husband, Joe Blondo. So, and then here's a picture of her with her eldest daughter, Fran, and a picture in front of the boarding house there. So we're going to listen to a little clip from her interview with Mr. Fred Krueger, talking about the boarding house. Let me figure out how to switch this over.
And can you tell us a little bit about these boarding houses? What role they played with the miners that were coming in here?
Well, in a lot of time, these people didn't know where to go, so they went into a family home, and the family home took them as a boarder. And until they got on their feet, then we all started to have boarding houses. Then they went there instead of to a private home.
Now, you have one right next door.
Oh yeah,
What can you tell us about that boarding house?
my mother and dad had that, and I was. And my mother said, "Now you get in here and you run this boarding house. This is yours." I said, "How can I feed people? I'm only 19 years old. I can't do that." My mother said, "I did it when I was 50. You can do it. Go." And I did. And I did. And one time I had 30 men. And imagine feeding them and everything. But they were good. I had only stable food. I didn't have all these desserts that they have now and that. I had, boy, if I had mashed potatoes and gravy, they were happy. But I always had stew and I did have steaks. Oh, yeah. I fed them good.
And
yeah.
you did the washing too?
Not for all of them. Most of them did their own. Oh yeah, I had a washroom in the back, and they had a scrub board and wash their clothes.
So,
Yeah.
was that the only boarding house now? Or were there others?
No, Mrs. Gosh, what was her name? The superintendent's sister-in-law had a boarding house there, but they didn't like her, so they all came to me. And I didn't like that because I didn't want her to get mad at me. But then finally we had another boarding house, which helped a lot because it was a relief for me. And but you know, and from time to time they were all full all the time. A lot of people, a lot of immigrants came here from all over.
So you would have Croatians, Italians,
Oh.
all in the same boarding house, or?
Right, not Italians. They were different. They not families. But I had Croatian, I had English people, oh yeah.
Okay, so the boarding houses didn't just cater to one ethnic group, but whoever was any ethnic group could
Right, right.
find shelter there.
Mhm.
Okay, how long did this boarding house kind of thing last? When did it finally
Well, let me see, I had it about, I think about 10 years. Well, with my uncle in Vuk, it was a little longer. My uncle stayed with us, and then this other one guy, he stayed. And they were like family, you know, and they stayed till they died.
in the
Yeah,
boarding house?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
So it's safe to say the early fifties is when the
Oh,
boarding
yeah,
houses
yeah,
finally
yeah, right.
began to decline.
Yeah.
So they were declining before the mines actually shut down. Okay, now this boarding house that you have next door here, is John and Antonia, they're the ones that had that
No,
originally?
no,
Or this
No.
was Francis's?
yeah,
Okay.
my mother.
This particular boarding house also is a little different than others. It had, didn't it have a little, wine making thing in the front yard?
We had, yeah, we had, and then the guy that had it before us, he made moonshine. It was against the law, but he made it, and he has underground, we have an underground thing in that.
And that's still there?
Right, mhm,
Okay, and that's where the moonshine was made?
right.
How did he vent it so the revenuers couldn't smell
Well, he did see it was underground and kept it pretty well hid, so they didn't know. He was lucky. You know, if they found out, he would have gone to jail.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but this underground still and this,
It's a tunnel,
tunnel,
right?
okay, all right. Another thing, about, the miners coming in that were immigrating here.
Okay. All right.
Did you ever find that tunnel?
Yes. Still there, and I put a picture of it. So back here, let me make sure I'm sharing I think I'm sharing it. Okay, so here's that hole. That's where the entrance to the tunnel is. In the very front, where the grocery store was, right behind there.
Yeah.
Now the secret's out, Charlie. So if you go down there, there's steps, and we've excavated it. The dirt has kind of come in, so we've dug as much of the dirt out. So it has an arched roof, and it's a real sturdy little cellar. So they knew how to build a tunnel, and the stories are that they have tunnels and that the tunnels connect. That there's tunnels that go all the way down to the depot. And you've probably heard of other stories like this, that the tunnel that the brick connects to and the bank and that. So I don't know. That's just what I've heard. Oh gosh.
So you found where the still was.
That's where it was. And that's where they found the wine, was down in that cellar. So so here's a few more pictures of, this is in the striped dress here is Fanny Meritich. And I talked about their other boarding house that was across the way. So this picture is them standing in the front yard of the boarding house. And that house is no longer there, but that was another boarding house. It's now a vacant lot. You can see the vacant lot today on the corner. So that was another house they had that was a boarding house. They're just, Fran's just the cutest little girl in the world. That little face is so cute. And then here's a picture of them in the front yard. So this is probably could be early 40s. And they had serious gardens at the time. Everyone had serious gardens, and it's how they supported themselves to live. You needed a garden, and they would go, this neighborhood of being all Croatian, they would go to each other's house and garden once, every week or whatever, every month they would go and weed out another person's garden. So they would do work parties like that. So I think that's what that was there. And behind here now, Fanny used to have a lot of roses. She loved roses, and she also had trees, and she has plum trees there. And her and Joe used to make wine too, and they'd also make plum brandy. So we've got plum trees there in the front yard. So the front yard was a very happening place for the boarding house for a long time. Here's another picture in the front yard. Fanny was, you can tell, a organizer, community organizer. Here they're doing a clothing drive for FDR for the war. So and the American flag, very patriotic family, and a family that was really committed to service to each other in the community, and very committed to service to the labor force of the mines.
Is that Charlie hold the newspaper?
Charlie must have been maybe a baby, because Fran's 11 years older than Charlie. So Fran's there holding with her little chin tucked is Fran. So I don't think she's 11 yet. So Charlie was sleeping. So as Kate said, Kate, by the 40s, things were really slowing down in the boarding house. They have Vuk, she said, and Tony Snyder. Tony Snyder was a brother-in-law, and they called Spock. And Spock, I just realized, means brother-in-law in Croatian. so I figured out why they call him Spock. And then George Radonovich and someone Hill were in there. But they made it more like apartments. They changed the framing around, so it was bigger rooms. And then by the 50s there, it's Fanny and Joe and Tony Snyder and Book. They call him Mike in this one, so he had a few names, I guess. And there's Charlie. Charlie finally shows up in the 50s. So here's some pictures from Fran's childhood in the boarding house. Here's her with her Uncle Joe's drum. Or well, that's her dad, but the drum, the Tamburitza band drum.
Those drums are.
You have them?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were her. Yep, her Uncle Joe's. Yeah, yeah, those are the cousins over there. Model pitch. Okay, Minorich or Minorich? No, Minorich or Minorich? No, I know you're Meritich, but okay, Charlie's a Glondo. We'll figure it out later. There's Fran on the porch, cutting her grandpa's hair. There's her with her chickens. There's Joe. Uncle Joe. I'm very proud of his service in World War II. Yes. Her dad, Uncle Joe. There's Fran with her dad's deer down at Carrick's. There's a picture of the sledding bunch on Brookside Hill with all their sleds. They had a little gang. The Brookside kids would gang would be against the cemetery side gang. You can hear about it in the interviews. Fran with her doll. Now, Fran, look at that face. She's in this house full of minors, and she's just the cutest thing. So they just left her and thought she was a little doll, and they would buy her dolls. So all the minors would buy her little things and take care of her. She's just the golden girl of the boarding house. There she is with her goats, and then she's out picking sweet peas. So, I mean, all of that is in some ways still happening today. Maybe not at Tamburitza Band, but you know, it's all still there. And Fran was born right in that house and lived her life. So I got to know Fran and got to hear a lot of her stories from what she remembers. And here's Fran. I made this sign with her, and here's a picture of her in the late 30s on the front walkway of the boarding house. So that was one of the most special parts of this whole experience, was getting to know Fran and getting to know Fran's stories, and you know, everyone else's stories, how much this place meant to all these kids and grandkids, and they're still there. I still have Fran's grandkids all around the block. Same as it ever was. I mean, her grandmother Fanny moved here, got off the train. I was just talking to Fred. Got off the train at 15, moved up the hill, and never left the rest of her life. She lived the rest of her life in the boarding house. I think she lived at 87, maybe. So here's some more pictures of the boarding house when we first bought it. And this is what the boarding house is looking like today. So we got a new roof and got her dried in a little bit. So we're still working on finishing out the inside, but we're getting close. And so maybe some other time I'll show you some more pictures. But that's it for me tonight. Yes, Mr. Kruger?
Library of Congress,
Yes,
type in Roslyn,
yes. Sanborn, I've seen them all.
the maps will go back further.
What year?
Since I got, I think they're 1888.
Okay, we're gonna look for another one,
We have-
another Sanborn
We
map.
have at the- okay.
Okay,
The ones at the Library of Congress have a yellow background, the outlines of the buildings.
yes,
Really show.
okay.
Showing mine.
Oh, sorry. Shoot. Okay. Yes, we can take. Yes. Yes. So that's that front section that juts out in front of the porch. So, so that building right there, that's where the cellar is, right? This underground, this, about this much of the yard is the cellar. And so that room there was an apartment by the time by its last iteration, it was an apartment. But back in 1912, you can see it's kind of a separate wing, so it's divided into thirds. There's the first floor is partitioned in a third, so it's got these two load-bearing walls in the middle, right here. So that whole section on the right there, besides the grocery store, is what that is. And then there was another kitchen over here where the right behind it in the second room was another big kitchen for the miners, for cooking for the miners. But things changed. I mean, it wasn't a time of they used the boarding house, so things changed. And if they didn't have 30 men anymore and they just had 5 men, you know, things changed. And there were indoor bathrooms and stuff in the boarding house. I'm sure there was a privy back in the original boarding house. So things changed a bit inside.
So I got a question.
Yes.
Same, but have you ever thought of checking, the police reports from like the Roslyn PD back then? They have to still exist somewhere.
I've seen some, there's some records like that in the city council minutes. Occasionally there would be a report if something happened. And then I've looked in the newspapers. Trust me, I've spent a lot of hours in the museum just
Can
looking.
you check the county archives? The county archives, they would have been transferred to the county archives after the department.
I'm sure there's records I haven't found. I've
Yeah.
done my darndest, but I'm sure there are records that I haven't seen.
And there's a good guy called Gritty Tours. He did he's like from Tacoma
Okay,
and he's on Facebook all the time. Gritty Tours.
okay,
He's really good at finding history because he did like the whole thing about the brick
sure.
history. If you need help trying to track
Okay.
down history.
So I didn't really mention a whole lot about, I mean, there's so much to talk about with both Kate and Fanny. They both have interviews with Fred. Well, Fanny's is an interview with Kelly Starkovich, but a student, but they're interviews with both of them. And I think Kate has 6 parts. And so she talks all about, Kate did a lot of things in her political career. She was a really big organizer and she actually went down in the mines and she was very big activist on the state level trying to keep the mines open. So, and they were Western miners also in the 30s. So, there's a lot of history just just in that family.
Yes.
To learn
So,
more.
yeah, I know, because the coal was what shut down was the grade of the coal was,
The grade of the coal, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I was just saying, if you need someone to find,
Okay.
I was trying to push you,
I'll try.
yeah.
I'll try and I'll get his name again later. Yeah. All right, Fred.
If we have, scanned and everything, you might have some people in here that have copies of the check stubs
Yes.
of the miners.
Yes.
They're really important information on those. The older ones, at least around now 1915 or so, the rent in Roslyn for a miner's home,
Oh, the rent.
the company home.
Yes.
Company, you don't realize they own a lot of.
Yes.
homes.
Yeah.
It's $4.50 to $5 a month. And then water was $1.50,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and their electricity. And eventually the miners created a hospital district.
Yes.
And out of their check, I think it was $150 a month would come out, and that was their insurance.
Yes.
But when you start looking at their checks, you're looking at checks that $27 is all they have left.
Mm-hmm.
That's every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we gotta admire their resourcefulness. That's the 4th R in Roslyn's history.
Yes. Resourcefulness. The 4th R. Yes. They had all sorts of ways to make it work. I think they would charge a rent for the room, and then another $3 for the board, and that would be the food, the cooking and cleaning. And then Fanny also worked as a midwife, and I don't know the year for this, but at one point she was charging $15 for a baby. So she actually was the midwife for a majority of the babies in Roslyn. So they were not they were very entrepreneurial, I will say, and you can tell that now in their family with all their businesses that they have. They had a variety store, they had Joe's taxi service, Joe Meritich's taxi service. They had all sorts of little side operations. It wasn't just a one miner's salary that was keeping all this going for them.
Did they have cows?
Yes, Kate had a cow. She had to go get it from the hill.
Right. And
Yes.
if they came down early, the cow was arrested,
Yes,
taken to jail.
yes,
the Holding area.
yes,
Then they had to pay a fine.
yes.
It was $1.
Okay,
And there was a mule that got out of the MWI mines,
yes,
100 feet around, and it got arrested.
yes.
And it was in town for 3 days,
Oh,
and it cost MWI company over $5. There was
Yeah.
a big meeting.
I bet there was a big meeting.
But the cows, the problem with all these cows is the manure. And the manure dumping ground was the back alley,
Mm-hmm,
and it got so bad, it went to the city council.
mm-hmm. I
And
can see that.
bottom line is this, the cows are illegal in the city limits, and what mushrooms out are dairies. And that's the
Ah,
dairies.
now we have dairy, yeah,
So the city solved the problem with cows.
having the dairy.
Mule poop from the mines.
Oh, that was some stories. They had a hell of a mountain. That came up in World War I. That's another story.
Okay, we'll have you back to tell us about the manure management. Kate tells a story. She broke her cow out of jail.
Yeah.
She broke all the cows out of jail. One day she was feeling feisty. She broke them all out of jail. So one day she got revenge on the cow and pounder. So, all right. Oh,
What's the final product going to be?
oh, sure. So the final product is going to be a guest house, so people can come rent a room and stay.
Pre-order?
You could pre-order rooms. I could give you an insider deal, Scott. there's gonna be 9 rentable rooms. So probably maybe this fall, we might be ready. And, before we open for business, we'll do an open house and you can come check it out. All right, thank you.